What happened to your hands?
Oh, don't pretend that you don't like this.
Why would I like it?
Because it's exciting.
No, it is not. It is dangerous. No, get rid of it.
I can't get rid of it. These are a part of me. I thought you loved all of me like I love all of you.
I'm scared.
Just relax, or you'll end up like Adam did. Buried in the park. No head, no feet, no hands. Skin grated off like a rind of pecorino.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. In today's episode, we'll be talking about the 8th episode of YellowJackets, season 2 of YellowJackets, just one episode away from the finale, Sona.
It had that feeling. This episode.
Absolutely. And this episode is called It Chooses. And we'll find out what that means right over the course of the episode. Before we get into that, I did want to mention a show that this is an acquired taste, but I did enjoy this. So I think maybe people may want to sample it. It's a new show that came out on Apple TV Plus. They've had a string of very successful shows. They just had an announcement yesterday that 3 months ago, they hit a new viewership high with the launch of Shrinking, or maybe when Shrinking was wrapping up. And then they kicked off the new season of Ted Lasso, which gave them a new month of viewership highs. Now they have that show with
Jennifer Garner. I've been watching that.
Oh, you have been? Is it good?
It's not good. No, it's not good.
I heard it wasn't good. That's why I haven't really talked about it.
I don't know why I persist in watching it. Maybe because Jennifer Garner is very likable. It's not appointment TV for me by any means, but it'll be like, oh, there's a new episode of this one. Let me just watch it. You know, I probably should have read the book. I probably would have enjoyed the book enough as like a beach read type thing. I don't think this should have been a series. I think it should have been a movie. But I haven't even let you say the title of it. I just jumped right in.
I actually don't remember the actual title of it. I have a vague understanding of the title.
The last thing he told me.
The last thing he told me, yes.
Yeah.
So that has been successful, apparently, surprisingly so. Maybe not because of the talent involved. The Big Door Prize was kind of big at the launch of the show, although I think the audience has tailed off on that. But most importantly is Ted Lasso is wrapping up. And simultaneously, they just kicked off Silo, which is the biggest launch they've ever had for any of their dramas, which means that they hit another ratings high this past month. Anyway, they're on this string of successes. This is all before Severance even comes back. So Apple TV Plus on a win streak. And I did want to bring up a new show that maybe you might want to check out. It's called High Desert.
Oh, I think I saw like the image of that in the Apple TV when I signed on to it.
It stars Patricia Arquette. This is originally going to be directed partially by Ben Stiller, which would be their third time they worked together.
They're so fun together.
Yeah, I mean, not only Severance, which was a huge success, obviously, but also on Escape from Dannemora, which is also very good if people haven't checked that out. This is a mini series. Definitely doesn't overstay its welcome. I think it's only like 6 episodes. Really, really great. I think she won an Emmy for that. Anyway, they've had this interesting partnership. His wife is one of the stars of the show as well, Ben Stiller's. But he's only here as a producer. I guess he was too busy to actually direct. He's once again directing a bunch of the episodes for Severance. What I would say is if you are a fan of Patricia Arquette, and your mileage may vary on this, you'll really enjoy this show. She's having an absolute blast. The series begins, and this is not a spoiler, it's the opening scene of it. She lives in a huge mansion. She's married to Matt Dillon. They are the envy of their family. They're having a huge family gathering. Her mom is there. She has a very close relationship with her mom, Bernadette Peters, and her sister is there, her brother-in-law. They're all kind of jealous of her, but also, of course, very happy to be living in this luxurious settings. Before the intro of the episode is up, before the credits even come up, the DEA has busted in. They apparently were dealing drugs, just marijuana, it apparently seems to be. There's a very funny piece of dialogue later on when someone was talking about the cocaine that they were selling. And she's like, I never sold cocaine. I was addicted to cocaine, but I didn't sell the cocaine. Turns out that her idyllic life was a total mess. She was a drug addict. Her husband gets arrested. They lose everything. And we catch up with her some years later. Her mom has died, and it's devastating to her. And her brothers and sister want to sell the house that she's living in, her mom's house. But she doesn't want to move out, but they need the money. And she needs the money, by the way. She's working at one of these frontier town, Old West town where she's one of the actresses. And the whole way that this is rendered is hilarious. She has to jump from one locale to another. They're basically paying her minimum wage, and the labor required to keep this show going is hilariously over the top. And over the course of the show, 3 episodes premiered right away. You see that not only is she actually a really good detective, she ends up becoming a private investigator. Sees an ad on TV for this completely failed PI, played by Brad Garrett, ends up imposing herself into his business, proves herself to be a really good detective. She has all these interpersonal issues going on. But what I found most entertaining about the show, I think, is that as the mystery is evolving, it turns out that it is intersecting with all these things that have actually happened to her in the past. Like, she is central to this story, but it's not like a conspiracy of some kind. It simply is just a coincidence in a way, but it makes her really relevant. It makes everything that happens in the course of solving these mysteries. It's practically like a mystery per week or per episode that she gets drawn into it in interesting ways. She's very funny. I think the tone of the show is pulling it off pretty well. I could imagine if you had like a Ben Stiller directing, some of this stuff would hit a little bit better, I think. And it's a little bit off, but I laughed at it a lot. It has very much a kind of a Big Lebowski feel to it. This very shaggy noir series. It's kind of a sun-drenched noir, kind of like the Big Lebowski as a reference point. And also, I think if you're a fan of Poker Face and you like this kind of quixotic central character solving mysteries and being very good at solving mysteries, like in very logical ways, it's not as good as Poker Face, but if you were a big fan of Poker Face and you like Patricia Arquette, I think you'll definitely like this show. And 3 episodes in, the reviews have been pretty mixed. I really enjoyed the first 3 episodes. I laughed a lot. It's only 30 minutes. I enjoyed it.
Cool.
So an easy watch and probably an easy binge. So maybe you can wait till you get to the end. If you're completely uninterested after episode 1, it's not going to get much different. If you really enjoy episode 1, you're just going to get a lot more of that as the show progresses. Okay, let's get into the episode itself. I watched the credits because I've been ignoring them this whole entire time. Most of the stuff that we saw last week is there again. However, there are definitely new scenes and also things that happened in the past. For example, we see someone breaking through the ice in a quick glimpse this week, which of course directly ties in to this episode. So I feel like that's what they're doing. It's almost like a compilation. They're adding scenes week to week.
Right.
Some of those scenes drop off, but then they have like teasers for the current episode. And also, I wonder if there are in there, I was looking for it, I didn't really see anything too relevant, I don't think, that could be teasers for the future, but I didn't necessarily see anything that I consider a direct spoiler. By discovery here, 1 episode away from the finale, big deal.
I mean, it's kind of sad, right? Because somebody is working very hard to do this,
yes.
And we've only just noticed it now.
Right. I mean, they give you that little skip option. I always skip. I'm sorry, but
I'm at 50-50 on skipping. They just let it run because I'm going to run and get my drink or, do one last thing before I sit down. But if I'm ready to go, I skip it.
I don't skip the Succession one because I like the music. But other than that, I pretty much skip. Same thing with Game of Thrones, by the way. I used to always listen to the theme music for Game of Thrones because it was like,
puts you in the mood.
Yeah, exactly. Let's break it down past and present. We see Lottie's recovering from her horrible beating from last week.
Oh, boy.
Mari really annoyed me here, but they do give you some sympathy here. You realize that this disgusted exterior that she's, acting like, ooh, it smells bad. She has internal bleeding from the kicks that she received from Shauna.
Honestly, if she does have a kidney infection, I don't know what on earth you're supposed to do without antibiotic.
Just drink lots of water. Which they don't have. Well, I guess they have plenty of water. They just melt the snow. So
I think they did a very good job in these first few minutes of showing how everyone is reaching a breaking point.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think we've all had that just like on our regular day, right? Where like things are going wrong, things are going wrong, things are going wrong. And then finally the straw that breaks the camel's back. And then you just like collapse into a heap of like, I cannot take it anymore. And I think that's what's happening with Mari.
Yeah. And I like that she's still putting on this facade of being, like the cool girl, like, or at least the detached. That detached coolness that she puts on. But you see when she drops the urine that she's at her breaking point too. So all of this has been big performance. But I like to see Misty too, to basically saying, be useful and shut up. Which
she's
she has every right to. Yeah.
Exactly.
Misty usually is the one who's the kind of, in denial of reality. So it's good to see her kind of put her foot down here too. Lottie in this haze that she's in has visions of the future. In rewatching the episode, just to take notes, I scanned through it and I did pause on these, and she sees the girls running across the snow. And, she sees a bunch of other things that don't seem to be as literal as this, but she also sees the ice breaking and someone breaking through the snow, which we find out, of course, by the end is Javi. She seems to be having actual visions of the future, which I guess we have implied that she does have visions of the future. But once again, whether this is accentuated by being out here or just something she always had, like when she potentially prevented that accident with her parents.
Exactly.
Definitely is seeing actual things that we know are going to happen. And in the past, I think there's been kind of like these vague flashes of stuff that you could read as like, well, that is something literal. She is literally seeing what's going to happen later in this episode. And all she needed was a couple of kicks to the head to unlock this power. We see Aquila talking to Nugget. And before we even have this reveal, I wrote that in my notes. That mouse is dead because there is this kind of like fuzziness on the edges of the screen. So I'm actually taking note of this, going like, this
amazing catch.
And immediately after my revelation, we have Thaisa grabbing this desiccated little mouse being like, this is dead.
Holy cow, that was disturbing.
Speaking of everyone having these kind of visions now and delusions, that they're all at their breaking points, like you mentioned, whether some of this is supernatural, some of this is just food deprivation. Not only has Aquila been petting a dead mouse for weeks now, Ty sees her other in her reflection as she's doing the dishes. And when she turns around,
other,
she's there in the room with her. So this is like an escalation, to say the least.
Yes.
Thaisa, by the way, calling out Aquila for her craziness when she, of course, is experiencing visions at that moment. Very in character for her, by the way. Aquila contemplates eating this little mouse corpse. They should throw it into the belt soup, I think, minimally.
I thought so too. I mean, honestly, I was so disgusted by this mouse situation. I don't know why. It really was nauseating for me. I do think you should throw the bones in there. Blah.
There's probably some protein on the bones too. I mean, it's probably just completely dried out.
Yeah.
Speaking of the belt soup, this is Jackie's belt, right? They found it in her bag.
Yes.
Maybe a little bit of yummy belt soup for everybody that night. Although they'll have something else on the menu very soon. Ben and Natalie are contemplating Lottie's death because everybody's concerned about how bad this beating she took is. They should be concerned. That was a severe beating she took. And they're saying that maybe it would be better if she died. I'm sure that some people saying that would mean like maybe it would be better if she died so they can eat her. Although the girls are so, fixated on her as a leader that they probably wouldn't want to eat her. But I think the subtext of what they're saying too is that maybe we could break up this mass delusion that everybody's having if Lottie was to die.
I mean, I don't think it was even subtext. I think it was straight out there between Ben and Natalie.
Yes.
Discord of Ben saying like, yes, then she would be at peace because she's in so much pain. And Natalie being like, no, I just mean because she's really screwing with people's heads around here.
Importantly here, she mentions the fact that even Javi has been turning to the dark side because she saw him bowing at one of the trees that have the symbol on it. Mm-hmm. And he asks Natalie, which one? Ben doesn't think that Javi's been praying at one of these trees. He thinks that Javi maybe has been whispering to somebody. That's my interpretation of this anyway.
Interesting.
So Ben goes and looks in this bag and finds a drawing of this tree after he hears this from Natalie. Is this Jacques' bag that he's going through?
I don't know. I thought maybe it was Javi's bag from way back.
Could it be Javi's? And then
I don't know. Is Javi doing the drawings? That's what I thought. I remember at the time just thinking, wow, Javi's a sound sleeper because he's doing this right next to his head and he's not hearing it.
Oh, I think that's a good theory, actually. I couldn't figure out whose bag he was rifling through that would have this drawing in it. That's probably correct.
I mean, it would have been good if we could have seen him drawing at some point.
He's a pretty good artist. Yeah, exactly. I'm a little surprised.
It was a very good drawing of that tree. Really beautiful, actually.
That's what he was doing out there, getting his art skills. Found a DVD player with one of those, learn art in a week. Then we see Ben is sharpening a knife, and Misty thinks that he's doing this potentially to commit suicide or something. He's like, no, I'm just modifying my crutch, doing a little exploring, looking for that tree, and before the episode is over.
I mean, for as psychopathic as Misty is, which she absolutely is, Can you imagine the burden on this woman right now, this girl right now? She's trying to keep Lottie alive.
Yes.
She's trying to keep Ben from killing himself. Everywhere she goes, she's got something to deal with.
Not even subtext in the show anymore at this point. But if, of course, Misty's the one who potentially, partially got them in this situation. It may also be not the case that, as bad as it was for her to smash that black box, given this, what might be some kind of weird magnetic field here, maybe they wouldn't have been able to find them anyway, because that's probably what took down the plane in the first place. So maybe it would have been masked.
By the way, I don't want to digress too far on this, but I read something on Reddit. I did not go down the rabbit hole, but something about like the black box cannot be activated unless it's submerged in water, so that it was never going to help them. I didn't research it further, but I would think it's something that the people that made the show would research. If that is a true fact, I think that's interesting.
I have to assume that it's not only when it's submerged, because I know that people have reclaimed the black box from like mountain crashes in the past. Now, whether it was broadcasting or whether it was just like they reclaimed it so that they could like get the flight information from it,
the data,
diagnose what might have caused the crash. But it's also possible that they wouldn't need to have a black box in an above ground location, because
you can see it.
Yeah, and not only could you see it, but the simple fact that you would know the flight's trajectory, and then you would see like, here it is on the radar, and here it is not on the radar. So that's the location we're looking in, right? And to that point, even though obviously what she did on its surface is so problematic, but there's got to be something else going on here, because you would figure you do know the flight's path. Right. You do know the last place the plane was located on the radar. There has to be something else going on. Like, for example, because of some kind of magnetic field or something, it lost radio contact very early on, because otherwise you would know exactly where the plane was, or within a mile or so of where it is, which should be pretty easy to send a crew out there to locate the actual fuselage. None of that has happened. So there's something more going on here, obviously. But anyway, going back to the point I was going to make, Misty, for better or worse, maybe she's gotten too much of what she wanted. This is the best version of Misty, right? She is just like when she is covering up murders in the present tense, that this is exactly what she's built for. So this is the best version of her. That's her skill set.
Yep.
Exactly. Before we move to present, there's a couple more things that happen here. Mari starts hearing that dripping again, and now other people are hearing it too. So if we needed any additional proof that she's not just having some kind of psychotic break, people are hearing this dripping. So maybe there is, once again, going back to that theory, that there might be some connection here to a cave system that we find out later in the show. But of course, not only do people actually hear this dripping, there is a psychotic vision here. She sees the blood oozing through the walls. That's our unreliable narrator again. And everybody practically in this show, I mean, almost everybody has some kind of vision at some point in this episode.
Interesting point. Yeah.
There is one more tender moment here before Javi exits the show. So Natalie has stitched up some gloves for Javi, and they're bonding here. And this is also winning Travis back to her side. Again, she's obviously been on the outs ever since Javi turned up. That night, everybody's concerned that Lottie will not recover if she doesn't have some food to eat. It's time to let fate decide which one of them has to die. Misty comes up with this method, which is the cards. She goes and digs up the cards and suggests this. And we'll circle back to this fateful dealing of the cards later in the episode. Okay, let's go to the present. I think a lot more stuff happens here in the present, so this is probably going to be much longer to cover all this. We pick up immediately after we left off. The girls are like, wow, I'm going to remember that song forever. Dancing to Lightning Crashes. How do you dance to Lightning Crashes, by the way? But apparently that's what they've been doing for the past few minutes.
I mean, you kind of would just sway, I feel, but okay.
I guess, yeah. You really can't get down to that song.
It really feels like a hold up your lighter kind of song, like more than anything else.
Exactly. Yeah. They do have a fire to dance around, so that's close. Shauna comes back. She'd been having that conversation with Jeff in the meantime, and she's disturbed, and she's like, we got to get out of here. Lottie and Van are suspicious of what's going on. What are they talking about? Van is just going to say, like, look, we need to talk about this. I'm going to take your keys, Shauna, and throw them into the woods. It might be a problem later.
By the way, I felt like the scars were more pronounced on Van's face than I had noticed previously.
I think it depends on the lighting. It could also be like how the makeup is applied, obviously. But I think it could also be the lighting. Maybe like in broad daylight, it's not as notable like when you have these kind of deep shadows.
Yeah, maybe.
So she wants to force this conversation. And over the course of this conversation, everything starts to come out.
Oh my God, everything.
It's such a great way that they let this conversation unfold, because you start to realize something you don't really think about as you're watching the show, or I don't anyway. Everybody is keeping something from somebody else. So Misty says, well, Thaisa hired a private investigator to investigate all of us, but that's okay because she took care of the private investigators. So now they find out that she's murdered somebody else.
And I liked her little, you're welcome.
Yes, exactly. And then Shauna goes, well, the FBI is investigating Natalie. And Misty's like, well, actually, that's not true. That was me and my boyfriend. Now Walter's her boyfriend all of a sudden.
I noticed that.
And then as she's reliving or remembering that whole thing, she mentions, you know what? While we were questioning Randy, he mentioned Jeff right away. So what was this thing about Jeff? Thaisa is like a super sleuth here, apparently. Jeff was the blackmailer. I think that's quite a leap she made there, although she's obviously correct.
I also felt her mind was working very quickly to reach that conclusion. Yes.
And of course, they find out that, well, she killed Adam, but he wasn't even the blackmailer. And not only that, but Shauna says, well, of course, the body's been found. And Misty, once again, says to Natalie, did you bury him 6 feet deep? She's like, well, I didn't really measure, but it seemed deep. It seemed pretty deep. But we know, by the way, going back to that they did not dig him very deep.
Right.
They were kind of like, that's deep enough.
Right.
It seemed like it was like 2 or 3 feet deep, not really deep enough.
For 6 feet, you could at least get in yourself. Well, I'm 5, whatever. So
exactly.
Yeah, it's clearing my head by quite a bit. So
yeah, they're not even close to being 6 feet when you consider that.
Yes.
It's a very good reference point to make. Shauna almost says, I thought Jeff was cheating on me. Even that, by the way, turned out to be incorrect.
That's right.
But of course, he was blackmailing her. So he's no innocent here either.
He was super suspicious in those first episodes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The cops show up to talk to Shauna's family. Matt is teamed up with Callie investigating her room. She starts calling him out, saying, what are you, some kind of pervert? You try to take advantage of me. I'm just a teenage girl. She's recording all of this, by the way. And he's like, you know what? There's only one pervert in this room. Gets under her skin by saying, you're a liar. You're manipulative, just like your mother. And this does actually get to her.
I mean, what a jerk this guy is, right?
Yes, big time.
Really
but
awful.
Also correct. He's the one who's most correct.
I know, but still.
Meanwhile, Jeff is getting questioned by Kevin, and everything that this actor does in this episode is absolutely incredible. He sells things that shouldn't even work and makes them perfect. It starts here. He's got to look at these photographs. They're really freaking him out.
Yeah.
He gets so uncomfortable with all this.
And you can tell he's kind of feeling sick about it too.
Oh my God. He's
like
just
physically
so
sick. Yeah.
But just his expression of trying to play it cool, but then simultaneously it's like he's fighting his impulse to like run away. It's just really great. And then he finally just says, I'm not going to say anything else without my lawyer being present, which is of course the smartest thing.
Smart. Yes.
I like the fact that Kevin like digs into all the details of this, including the fact that the missing hands and the head, which of course is Misty's doing. But could you imagine Jeff at this is thinking like, how insane is my wife?
The cheese grater. Oh my gosh, that's grim.
Yes, the cheese grater on the tattoo. Just, yeah. Could you imagine if you just found this out about your husband, for example, you'd be like, he told me he accidentally killed somebody. This is psychotic behavior and seems very premeditated. Paralleling here, we see that Walter is at home. Any question as to how rich he was and whether that was just a made up story or something? Absolutely not. He lives in a beautiful open plan.
So home. Gorgeous. Oh my gosh. Really. Lovely.
He's putting together this incredibly complicated puzzle.
Huge. I am a big puzzler, and this puzzle seemed massive. My standard is like 1,000, but they still don't take up that much space.
Yes. This is thousands and the pretty opaque pattern to follow.
Yeah.
Okay. Interestingly, I am not a music theater person, but I am familiar with Sweeney Todd because, I like grisly stories.
I like murder.
I like murder. Exactly. I've only seen the show once. I assumed this was from Sweeney Todd, but I went and did a little research out of curiosity to see like, what is this actual musical piece, as it's often important. So first of all, spoilers for Sweeney Todd, everybody. For anybody who doesn't know this 75-year-old play or whatever it is at this point. Sweeney Todd is the story of Sweeney Todd, who is a barber. He's like lost everything he thinks, and he gets revenge on people that he thinks have wronged him. And it starts off being direct revenge for people who don't recognize who he is, and eventually works its way up to just being anybody who's rich or annoys him, starts to murder them, and then gets an accomplice who cooks these people into pies. So, of course, here we have a cannibalism connection. We have a revenge plot as well. And most importantly, in this song, Not While I'm Around, it is the accomplice to this murderer. There's a young boy who starts to assist her. He is wary of Sweeney Todd at this point and is saying that no one will hurt you, not while I'm around. So it does make me curious to say, is Walter going to be this person who is protecting Misty, for example, when she's actually the murderer? And he's not aware of it, right? If you want to do a correct direct correlation. So maybe I'm overreading into it, but probably not, considering.
Yeah, interesting.
And just as this is all happening, he starts getting a bunch of notifications from some of his online friends. People are mentioning, for example, that she is a literal man eater. I guess people are theorizing that Shauna ate the body parts that are missing.
More cannibalism.
Someone uses the hashtag putting the sick in forensics. And this is when he starts saying
so much here that I did not catch. I'm very
I paused it. I paused it on the rewatch. He immediately writes a note, an email to the police department saying that I have information about the case. What would you think he's going to tell the police officers?
I don't know. Does he like Misty enough to redirect the police officers, or is he trying to be the one that comes through and solves this entire thing? I mean, I go back to that comment about, I want to be Moriarty to your Sherlock. That would indicate that he has been doing this all as a pretense just to be the one that comes in and saves the day. What do you think?
I'm still on the fence as to which direction it goes in, but based on the scenes from next week, it makes me feel that he is going to be protecting her. And maybe that goes back to the musical cue as well. Just like he said last week that, or a couple of weeks ago, that he still loved his Nana, even though, she killed his grandfather. Maybe he wants to protect her. Does he want to protect her from Shauna, for example, and that Shauna might be the killer and she wants to protect him? Protect her.
I see what you're saying.
We do see Walter head out from that beautiful house by the end of the episode. And now he's listening to Phantom of the Opera. I don't know if this is thematically relevant or just another song he's listening to.
Just continuing his affection for show tunes.
Exactly.
But you did notice he found something purple in his closet before he left.
Very good point. Yes, he's going to maybe sneak onto that compound. Okay, the next scene we have is on paper, maybe a scene that I should hate. But I think because of Jeff, this scene is incredible. He is having a nightmare sequence. He thinks Shauna is back.
Gosh, yes. Okay.
She has knives for hands. Once again, this sounds terrible on paper and just ridiculously over the top, but his line readings here are incredible. He's like, put those away.
Your mom went through a lot out there in the wilderness, Cal. I mean, she lost a lot of people. Her best friend.
Yeah, Jackie, I know.
Yeah, Jackie. She lost somebody else out there, too. She had a baby out there. It was our baby. It was hers and mine. She was pregnant when that plane went down.
Jesus. So I had a sister.
Brother. Yeah. She had a baby. No baby boy.
Oh my God.
Hey, listen. My point here is that all that stuff, all right, that's your mom's burden to bear. And mine too, I guess. But you don't have to make it yours, okay?
It's dangerous. I thought you liked this. But yes, he's so in character. He should be terrified for his life. And he's just like, what if somebody sees? I like that Shauna also says here at the end of the dream sequence that he has to stay still or he's going to end up like Adam with his skin grated off like a rind of pecorino.
Eek. Yes.
So, of course, he wakes up from this nightmare and he finds Callie also can't sleep and she's drinking, no less. So they share a beer. And speaking of him, once again, being MVP of this episode, he goes from this really like one of the most hilarious sequences from this show ever in that dream sequence, his performance there, to being like really compassionate here, describing that she went through a lot. And of course, acknowledging the fact of something we suspected for a while. He knows about the baby because, of course, he read her diaries and that was in the diary as well. That must have been really traumatic for him to have made that revelation at that point, right? And I mean, I guess he's never really had this conversation with Shauna either, and he's kind of been holding this inside.
Right.
So this really, like you mentioned, how they've really reclaimed this character this year. He's so sympathetic here in his compassion for her and his feeling the culpability of what he's done as well. This is probably the best argument for Shauna being made here by him. A case she's not been able to make for herself this whole entire season, but a lot of compassion here for him from him.
Honestly, what I took away from this episode was that he really does love her and maybe has always loved her, right? Like they talk a lot about the whole thing about Jackie being kind of, the queen bee, the it girl, and who he's supposed to be with. But I think maybe he has always loved Shauna and now has gotten wrapped up in this giant mess as a result.
Back with the ladies here towards the end of the episode. Now that everything's out in the open, Shauna makes a really important confession to herself in a way that she's been doing all these things, trying to put things right, and it's just making everything worse and worse, which of course, duh, considering how out of control everything is.
Yes.
The ladies there at the compound, at Lottie's compound, start discussing, should they just finally talk about everything that happened? And I'm like, yes, please do. I'd love to hear this conversation, which I guess we have to wait till next week to hear, but maybe get it all out in the open finally. Lottie mentions the fact that she thinks the power's back. They're still trying to make the argument that there's not something supernatural going on. They've all been drawn there. She makes a point, right? Like, why are they all there now all of a sudden? What's happening? And now as we get to the very end of the episode, we see that in the past, the first person who's chosen by the card with this scarred queen card is Nat, which of course we know she does not die because she's still alive now.
I think they did a good job of creating tension here. We already know that she lives to see the future. So, that's kind of a rough situation to work with, but I think they did make it feel tense.
As we saw in the very first scene of this whole entire series, the girl who gets hunted in the woods wearing Jackie's necklace, they put the necklace onto Natalie. Shauna asks her to turn around. She's going to slit her throat. But then Natalie turns around and says, nope, you got to look me in the eyes when you do it. Shauna backs out and Natalie makes an escape. Eventually, Javi catches up to her, tells her to follow him, that he has a place where she can hide, which of course she should take him at his word because he was hiding somewhere for some period of time. First interesting thing I want to note here is that they did this when Ben wasn't around. You figure Ben would be on the chopping block, potentially.
I know. I was thinking that too, that if anything, it just at least doesn't seem fair to do it without everyone present.
Right.
Unless they knew, of course, that Ben would be like, there's no way I'm letting you do this.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say, is that Ben is still the adult in the room. And maybe he would just say, like, this is crazy. You guys have to stop. And they might lose their courage in a way.
Right.
So maybe that
I hadn't thought about that aspect when I watched it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Meanwhile, Ben has been on this journey looking for that tree. He finds it and he finds a lot of other stuff too, right? He gets down. Somehow, even though Natalie knew where this tree was, by the way, has seen, not only that, has seen Javi there, has seen the green spot under the tree, never dug under there to look to see if there was an opening. Somehow she has, both of her and Travis have somehow missed this before, but Ben goes down there and, as we anticipated, has found some kind of cave system. We also see a lot of little bones. It looks like bird bones there. So someone's been down there eating something, birds or other things as well, other small creatures. But it's like, it's a warm, it's wet, it has vegetation growing. So this is quite a discovery that he's made here. And I guess Javi knew about it, but never told them. Interesting.
Well, he wasn't saying much of anything until just now, right? So,
but I mean, he could prevent someone from dying potentially if there's things down there to eat, right?
Yeah, true.
Unless he's protecting someone, which I do suspect there are people down there, or at least one person. So while this is happening in the past, they're now hunting Natalie through the snow. And Ben has made this discovery. In the present, they're cutting back to these girls once again having another ritualized murder potentially. Lottie says that one of them has to die. They have to make a sacrifice to this supernatural force, whatever it happens to be. And they think this is a crazy suggestion, but Lottie makes a pretty interesting point that, hey, Thaisa, you have already killed a dog. You are afraid you're going to kill a family member. You have nearly killed a family member already, potentially more than one. Shauna and Misty have both become murderers. And Van is really depressed. That doesn't really seem like the same level, but they don't even know, of course, that she has cancer as well, or Lottie doesn't know anyway. And of course, Natalie was, about to kill herself just a week before.
I mean, I love how she goes around the circle and just tells everybody, what do you mean you think you're basically fine? This is the situation. And I enjoyed that scene. But once again, and I know I'm like a broken record with this, it just seems like a different person than the teen version of her.
Yeah. Lottie's method of killing one of them off is to poison one of the teas, and then they'll all drink, and whoever dies, dies. The ladies are contemplating this as the episode comes to an end. In the past, we see that Javi has caught up to Natalie, as I mentioned, taking her to this cave, I believe, and the girls are catching up. All this is happening at the same time, and at that moment, the ice breaks. Javi falls through. Natalie's about to rescue him, interestingly. Misty holds her back. So that he can die. For a second there, I thought he was going to die and they weren't going to pull him out. I was just like, wow, what an incredible way.
Seems like you really just have a matter of seconds, right? Before the person is too deep in to catch them. It really is tricky timing.
And then Van puts a button on this by saying the wilderness chose. Interesting that we see this underwater shot of Javi drowning. And of course, this is pretty much the same place where that white stag went under the ice as well.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that is the title of the show. It chooses. And that's where we wrap up the episode.
Poor Javi.
Yeah, poor Javi indeed. And of course, next week, we have the finale. I have some questions. Is Travis going to eat Javi? I assume he has to, right? I mean, what else is he going to do?
I was thinking that too. Eating your own brother, that's rough.
He's eating something in those coming attractions. So I assume it's his brother. I mean, that's the most obvious thing. Man, how traumatic is that going to be? No wonder Travis is a complete mess in the present tense. He killed himself, of course. And it crystallized in this episode, the guilt that all of these people have, that Javi died to protect Natalie, that Natalie could have pulled him out, but restrained herself. Can she ever admit that to Travis? Travis, of course, having eaten his brother to survive. Shauna having lost the baby. The trauma here is off the charts for everybody.
Yeah,
involved.
I was wondering too if there would be some sort of tacit agreement between the girls who are at the lake to not explain exactly what happened and how it happened to the people back at the cabin. I don't know. It struck me again watching this about like when we see the adult versions, like how forever bonded you would be to people that have gone through this insane experience with you. I mean, Shauna pretty much almost sliced Natalie's throat open.
Yeah.
And here they are hanging out together, dancing to lightning crashes.
Yeah, it's incredible when you think about how they must have rewritten those traumas from the past for them to even be able to tolerate each other, right? Like for
be
all
in the
reasons
presence of each other. Yeah.
Or maybe they're the only ones that survived in a way. So at some point, if it gets to the point where everybody turns on each other, like maybe in season 3, we see factions break down and there's an actual war, like where did the rest of these girls go? That if it ends up being just a few of them, just a handful of them that actually survived, then maybe they're bonded through that like they've all done absolutely unconscionable things to each other.
Right.
So nobody's hands are clean here. And that's what I think is interesting about even in this episode, everything they've done to each other that is unconscionable. Shauna almost killing Natalie, like you said. Natalie could have rescued Javi, but didn't. We knew that she was close with Travis in recent times, and the guilt she must have all the time when they're together, right? Knowing what she did.
Yes. And part of what sets this into motion is that they think that as much as they're all starving, Lottie in particular needs to eat. And that's because Shauna went nuts on her.
Exactly. And we don't even know what other atrocities Misty might commit in the past. But just here, you see how Natalie gives Misty the cold shoulder normally in the 2023 timeline. Just in this episode, you think about the fact when Misty kept her from rescuing Huff.
Yeah.
Right? There's probably way more worse to come. And of course, if they ever find out that she smashed that flight recorder, that's not
I
going to
mean,
make
would she see it that way though? Because what Misty said to her was like, essentially, if it's not him, it's going to be you. So
right. Yeah.
in her way, Misty was looking out for her, which we all know it's a dangerous position to be in when Misty is looking out for you. People die.
Exactly. In the moment, I actually thought that maybe she would rescue Javi and that would get her a pass, right? They'd say like, well, she saved Javi, we can't eat her. And they would come up with some other mechanism of choosing. But I was a little surprised. I did not expect Javi, after having disappeared for so long and then being resurrected here on the show.
Right.
But that being said, Javi is a younger actor. He's already grown.
He was
6
getting
inches.
very tall.
Right. He's already 6 inches taller from season 1. And if another year and a half goes by for season 3, he'll be like a whole foot taller. Exactly.
He wasn't talking because his voice has changed so much.
Exactly. I had read something somewhere that the young actor who plays Travis does the voice of the adult Travis, which I think is interesting.
Really? Huh.
Not that he's had much dialogue because he's been dead.
No.
But,
yes.
in the flashbacks, we do see here, like, for example, there was the whole conversation that Natalie had with Travis where he was asking, what did you see when she overdoses? And that apparently was all dubbed by the child actor. Interesting. Yeah. One more thing that we see in the coming attractions is Walter and Jeff together. And Walter says, let's dispose of this body to Jeff. I see like a refrigerator behind him, but it's like a giant refrigerator. I think they're at the morgue. You think? Sneaking
I don't
away
know,
with
but
Adam's body?
Maybe. Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good theory.
I think they're cutting it to make you think like, oh, they've murdered someone, but I don't think that's
right. That's what I was going to say is I don't think
Yeah.
that's the case at all. Yeah.
No body, no proof. Maybe. I mean, there definitely was a body and photographs of it.
Right.
And
I mean,
the
that's
DNA results. So I'm not
yeah.
sure how much help it goes, like if the remains are no longer there, if that proves anything.
I agree with you.
So it could be a futile attempt by Jeff and maybe a Kaka maybe planned, but he wouldn't be the first stupid plan he came up with. So
It's very true.
and based on his blackmailing expertise. I think that's it. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I mean, I really enjoyed this episode. I feel like they're really building towards something. The pace is picking up. I liked a lot about it, honestly. And, as we talked about when we talked about Succession last, I'm just really enjoying this season in a way that I don't think I enjoyed the first season. So I'm really looking forward to the rest of it.
Yeah, just one more episode to go. You had mentioned last week, I hadn't really noticed this. You mentioned that some people had been negative on the season. And I did coincidentally been listening to another podcast, not about YellowJackets, but just in passing on that podcast. They had made a similar critique that the show in the story in the present wasn't that great, that the story in the past was more interesting. And I'm like, well, I totally disagree with that. First of all, it made me think that, I could read the show ungenerously in that it has been pretty slow to reveal its secrets about what happened in the past. So I guess that could be a frustration to some people. Although I read the show more as this metaphor for these women trying to overcome these things that they're running away from overtly in the present, and then how this still has bonded them together. And if you read it in that regard and don't even worry about the conspiracy, I think that that's the most interesting part of the show. So it hasn't been frustrating to me, but it does seem like now they have to make those concessions to explain some of this. And I think we are going to get a lot of answers next week. As you mentioned, Sona, we will be covering the next episode of Succession in just a couple more days. Rumor is someone dies. Someone of the main characters dies this week. I do not think that is the case. I do not.
I had not heard that.
But apparently there is no screeners going out again this week. We will see if that is the case. And we'll be covering that. Tune in if you're watching Succession or catch up with it. 2 more episodes of Succession, 1 more episode of YellowJackets. If you haven't subscribed to our podcast, make sure you do so you get notifications when all those episodes become available. And I'll be continuing to watch some of these other shows. I still have not been able to put together a current recap of the show Silo, but I have been watching that and enjoying it. And we will be covering that once these other shows wrap up, because there's just so many things that are wrapping up in the next couple weeks. So stay tuned for all of that. Sona, by chance, did you watch the trailer for The Idol?
No. Oh my God. What is wrong with me? Why can't I just watch this 2-minute clip?
It's just 2 minutes long.
Something is truly wrong with me.
Some news on that front. The Weeknd has officially changed his name back to his original name, which is
I think I saw that.
Abel Tesfaye, Abel Tesfaye, which is his actual name. But yeah, he's dropping the Weekend moniker for whatever reasons. But he's branching out. Not only the most streamed artist of probably the past 5 years, but now also a movie star and a TV star, potentially, if this show goes well. That's one thing we'll be covering in June. And there's a lot of other stuff coming too. So less stuff than just this 1 month. But nonetheless, stuff we will be covering throughout.
That's fine. This 1 month has too much stuff.
Exactly. Exhausting. Utterly exhausting. Sona, thanks again for the conversation.
Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay, bye.